Okay, welcome to the first webinar of a series that I have designed in order to talk and discuss about very important academic and research elements, which are critical thinking, critical analysis, critical reading, and critical writing. Okay. The structure of each one of those webinars is that in the first one, you will have exercises that are focused on daily life situation. And on the second part, you will have exercises related to academic and research situations. Oh my God, Mark, we have to talk about this. Oh, yeah. Okay, let's begin with this quote. You say, oh, it's too old, that quote. But if you read it, you will see how permanent its impact can be. And what is important here is to check that critical thinking is something that is important not only for individuals, but also for society. And that since education is the means used to incorporate people to society and to also make their values, the beliefs of society go from one generation to another generation apart from knowledge, you will see that critical thinking is something that individuals need to look for and society should promote by means of education. Something that, as we know, is not completely true, because many times education is focused on providing knowledge and making sure that that knowledge is repeated, sometimes applied, but basically repeated. So let's begin telling you what our focus is for today. First, we are going to discuss what critical thinking is. Then we will analyze about the critical skills, the skills that you need to perform critical thinking. And finally, you will be provided with some exercises to develop these skills. And those exercises are related to daily life situation. They are already posted to the discussion space of Doctoral Net. So let's begin. We have already said that critical thinking is important for individuals and for societies, and therefore it is an expected outcome for higher education. However, what critical thinking is may be a field that is not quite understood by everybody, even for people who are expected to perform it, okay? So that will be our first goal, to talk about concepts of critical thinking, but trying not just to talk about them, but trying to get common elements that are present in each one of them in order to have a better picture of what is implied when we are asked to be critical thinkers. Let's begin with the idea of the man that we presented the first quote. And what is important here is to check the two words in red, examination and test of propositions. Because that tells us that critical thinking is something that is used in a deep level, that implies the evaluation of things that are presented to us. So we get information, but we go beyond the knowing level and go into the evaluation level and the proving level. And when we prove, we need evidence to know if something is valid or not. We are not saying true, because truth is a very abstract concept that may change from one person to another. Okay, so examination and test. Let's see the next one. It was provided by Glaser, and it is from the same university. Oh, he was from the same university that Adrian. Okay, now look at this in the words in red. He proposed that when you do critical thinking, you have to have three elements. An aptitude, okay? An aptitude to approach problems and situations in a thoughtful way. So aptitude is an emotional element, and thoughtfulness is a cognitive, basically a cognitive element. But you have to have those two things in order to perform critical thinking. You also need to know how you can do it, and that's why we are presenting this webinar. You need to know the courses of action that you can follow in order to say, hey, I am doing critical thinking. Yeah, that's where the logo comes from. Yeah. And finally, you need some skill in order to that you must apply in order to perform critical thinking. So from the first one, we talk about test and examination, and now we have aptitude, thoughtfulness, knowledge, and application of skills. Welcome, Raven. Okay, let's see another concept so we can have enough elements to get to a more clear picture of what critical thinking is. And this is provided by Paul and Elder and was published by the Foundation for Critical Thinking. So let's see what they think about. If you look at this concept and check the words in red, you will have another aspect of what critical thinking is. Because this concept talks about a process that makes the quality of your thinking improved. So it's not just that I'm thinking, I'm a thinking being, I'm a person, I'm a human being. But it's not only that, it's that you need to improve how you perform the process of thinking. Oh, you have that. That's good, Adrian. Okay, and also look at the end of the concept. And they propose that that process is self-directed. And we can go back to the second concept. Self-disciplined, which means an attitude. Self-monitored, which means a course of action in which you reflect upon your actions. And it's self-corrective, which means that you improve your process in order to improve the results of that process. So far, any question or anything that you want to talk about? Remember, feel free to ask or comment. Okay, you say, well, now we know what scholars have said about critical thinking, but what happened when we asked professors and students about the same thing? Well, let's see. This in a study that was done by Lloyd and Bard, they have these three conclusions. And the first one is, let's see, astonished to a certain extent, because it means that professors and students think that critical thinking is exactly what the scholars said. So we can say, it is because they have read it and then they just are telling that the same thing. We don't know, but that has not to be completely true. And the other two conclusions tell us the difference between students and professors, but also two parts of critical thinking. Students are worried about the quality of the product, and that's not surprising because students are worried about grades. Okay? And professors are more interested on how the process is done, since they are not pushed by grades. Okay? But at the end, we have other elements to take into account, okay? Which is there is a product and there is a process. So as I just say, metacognition is the basis for critical thinking, is one of the elements for doing that, and is one of the skills that you need to assure the quality of the critical thinking process. We are going to talk about metacognition in very, very soon. So, if we analyze all the concepts that we have already presented, it is possible to look for common elements. And these are the common elements. We have two components and we have two objectives. So the components are, in fact, a set of skills. Okay? Skills that you need to apply in an efficient way in order to generate information or in order to process information. And there is also another component, which is the habit. And remember the first part, which says an aptitude to do critical thinking, is a habit that you apply, that you use in order to apply your skills and do critical thinking. So, you need the skills, yeah, but you also need the aptitude to use those skills. And you have two main objectives. You do that because of an individual reason and because of a social reason. The individual reason is related to the need to perform high-order thinking, the need to reflect upon what is around you and analyze it, interpret it, and get to a conclusion about that element and its impact on you as a person. Okay? Besides that, doctoral students are obliged to do high-order thinking, so you have an extra reason to do that. But there is also a social objective. Why? Because when you perform critical thinking and you get to conclusion, and especially about the validity of those conclusions, you are making critique of the society or of social things that have happened around you. When you listen to a politician talking and you do critical thinking about their words, you are doing a social critique, and you are able to say at the end, okay, this person has defined this idea, discussed this idea, and I think that according to the evidence that was presented, they are valid or not. And that's why critical thinking is so important for the functioning of society, because when you have more critical thinkers, you are able to do a better critique of what is happening from the social point of view, and you can impact the decision of the people who rule the society. So it's important to have critical thinking. But let's first say what critical thinking is not. Mark says, my critical thinking is telling me that I need different passports to the USA. Welcome to the club of people who want different passports. And Adrian says, in the academia, for advancing the correct state of knowledge, yeah, of course. The only way that we can advance things in the academic world and we have generate new ideas and new approaches is with critical thinking, because when a scholar presents an idea to be debated in the academic world, you need to be critical thinker in order to say, oh, this is a valid position because of this evidence, or no, this is nonsense because the evidence does not support that. So many students, special students, said that, okay, I know I have a lot of information ready for developing my thesis. But the problem is that having the information or repeating the information is not critical thinking. It's just repetition of information. What is not critical thinking also is that you have the skills that you need to perform critical thinking, but you do not use it. So, if you are not able to do an analysis, you are able to do an analysis, but you decide that you don't want to do an analysis, so you are not doing critical thinking. You have the tools, but you don't use the tools. And another element that tells you that that is not critical thinking is when you use your skills, get to a conclusion, but you do not accept the results of that thinking process, because it's not what you expected to have. It's something that happened when a doctoral student is doing a research for their thesis, and then the result, the findings are different from what that person has expected, and they say, no, this cannot be this way. Let me change this, or let me just avoid to mention that this is different. Okay, that's not critical thinking. So as Rin says, we'll need to process that information by abstracting meaningful patterns and categories based on logical reasoning. That's one of the things that you can do, and we are going to talk about it. So what is critical thinking? It's when you look for information in a deliberate way, in an organized way, with a clear goal to achieve. And then you use your skills, your critical thinking skills, every day, at every moment. And when, after putting into practice those skills, you accept the findings of the process. That means that a critical thinker can do all those things. And when I say a critical thinker can do all those things, it means that you need to master each one of those actions. Mark, I'm working on a DBA, not a PhD. My area is application of existing case study research, not replicating it, but rather application of the data is a different methodology. It could be, but it doesn't mean that you don't have to be critical, whatever you are doing, because you need to be critical in your personal life and, of course, in your academic life, okay? And when you propose the application of are in fact, or you need to do critical thinking. You have to be sure that what you are proposing is supported enough to be relevant and to be viable and valid. Yes, you need to be critical in every turning point decision, and also whenever you make a decision, you have to support that decision, and to support it, you need to approach it critically. Even if you, especially I would say, if you have to accept the result of your process of critical thinking. So let's see what you are supposed to do to be a critical thinker. And the first one, it says, is to be objective in what you do. It doesn't mean that you have to apply any specific research design. I'm not telling you that you have to use one of those research designs that takes you out of the situation and that you have to use only quantitative research design. I'm not talking about that. When I say objectively, it means that you know what your feelings and what your values and beliefs and opinions are, and you make them clear, and you try to establish the border between what is happening and all those elements that belongs to you. It's not that you have to put yourself and your study into a laboratory situation. No, it's not that. It's that you can do, for example, qualitative design, but you need to establish what is impacted by your own emotional, personal system. So everybody can know what happens in the study and how much of that study is impacted by your own beliefs and opinions. So the thing is that then you are expected to approach to a situation or a problem and identify the elements, the ideas, or the arguments that are involved in that situation. Please check that I have put a kind of definition of what arguments is, or are in this case. And if you check it, is set of reasons and or evidence to support a conclusion. Okay? That's what argument means in this context. It's not to it's not only to exchange ideas, it's to provide the reasons and the evidence that will help us to evaluate those ideas. Can we then say, Adrian says, can we then say critical thinking requires that we both be able to identify the relevant trees and then be able to see the wood, possibly a new wood, based on those trees? Yes, that's what it is. That's a very good example of what we are saying. You need to identify what are the main constituents of a situation, how they relate to each other, which is the third one. You need to know the relationship between all the elements that are involved in this situation in order to be able to have a very good picture of what is happening. I mean, you cannot just stay at the basic level and say, oh, it seems to be that this is related to this. No, you need to go beyond that point and look for relationships that may be not overt enough to be seen at the first moment. Okay? And this applies not only to academic and research situations, but also to daily life situations. How many times do you see a social situation and you think these are the elements, and this is related to that lady, and that lady is related to this, and it's not exactly what is happening, okay? Mark says, DOD mediation of contracts that went bad, much closer to negotiation of bad situation to avoid litigation. Oh yeah, well, Mark, you know your legal things. But at the end is that you need to go into the situation, into the ideas, and try to get all the elements that are necessary to achieve a good picture of what is happening. So that's what it said. Once you know the elements and understand the relationship, you can evaluate the ideas or the situation in order to be clear what part of it is weak and what part of it is strong. When you read an article about something that is related to your topic, you need to know what is strong, what ideas are strong enough and valid enough to take them into account when you are doing your study, and what are the weaknesses that are related to those ideas. Because if you take all the ideas without such an evaluation, you will be using things that are not appropriate and are not valid, okay? And once you have a judgment about the situation, it is necessary to think about the implication that those ideas of that situation has to other things. In your case, you have to establish what is the implication of the study that you have already read in relation to your own study. It is on the same line of thought, or it is against your line of thought. And you need to establish that in order to know how to use the information. You are not going to put aside the information that is not on your own line of thought. No. You need to take the information that is against your way of thinking and analyze it, and then try to make critical thinking of it and establish that in your own thesis. I mean, you don't sweep the dust under the rug. No. You take that dust, analyze it, and then say, this can be used for this, or this cannot be used to this because of this. So that means that you, a critical thinker, approach situations and problems in a systematic way, in an organized way, okay? And create the argument, which is what I said before, set of reasons, evidence to support a conclusion. Create those arguments in a structured way and using valid evidence to support it. And finally, not finally, it's not the last word, but a critical thinker has to reflect about how much their emotional system, the combination of their values, of their beliefs, of their opinions, how much have impacted the process that his or that person is doing, their critical thinking, because you cannot put yourself out of your system or values or beliefs and opinions. And you need to know how much those elements are influencing, for instance, your selection of a methodology. Why do you select a methodology for your study? Is it because you like it, or is it because it is the most appropriate one for performing your study? And you need to think about that and make it conscious in order to as I said before, is not that you put them aside of your study, but you make them clear. So any reader can say, okay, this person is in favor of this, and the impact of this person's ideas are this. Okay? But you need to do that. And finally, a critical thinker really reflect upon the whole process of thinking, which is what Adrian said before about metacognition. That person reflects upon what they have done and say, okay, I did this, I read this, remember, I did not do this. I have to go back and perform, or improve my process. Any question? Okay. Remember that you can do it, you can ask your question now, or we can talk about all the things at the end. Okay, so this means, all the things means that the whole critical thinking begins on you. You are performing it, and you are the person who gathers information and also revisit experiences and put it together with the new information and then brush it with your assumption, your belief, with your emotional system in order to get to solve problem or get a deeper meaning of what is happening or justify actions or be against actions, and also to introduce changes. The thing is that all those things begin on you. And the other part are the things, the elements that go into the information in order to get the actions that are on the upper level. Problem solving, meaning, changes, and so on. Then, it means that critical thinking is very, very important, not only for you as an individual, but also for you as part of a society. And in this graph, you can see how critical thinking is the basis for problem solving, creativity, and so on. And I would like to talk about openness, because when you are a good critical thinker, you are open to new ideas, new perspectives, new ways of living. And that makes, at the end, our society more available to address the things that are happening. You are open. Any critical thinking, not critical thinker could be a person with walls around that person in order to just look what he wants or she wants to look. So it's time to talk about the basic critical thinking skills. There are many approaches regarding this point. I just chose these 7 skills because I think that they are very important for the critical thinking process, but also that you can work on them in order to either develop them or improve your mastery of them. So let's begin with something that Joy Bell says that she is very good at it, which is observation. This is, in fact, this is the first step of the critical thinking process, because you need to perceive information, gather information in order to begin the whole process. And the thing is that when you gather that information through observation, it is necessary that you have a goal for that information, that you have that you make it an intended observation. So when you are going to read an article, first of all, you need to establish what is your goal when you are reading this. Do you read it for looking for a methodology, or you want to read it because you want to know what theory can be used, or was used there, and if it could be useful for yours? That's the thing that implies an intended observation. Okay. Then, once you have the information, it's time to interpret it. As it means, it's time to understand it in such a way that you can communicate it. Okay? So, it's something that you go beyond the decoding stage and go into the deep understanding of the situation. What is happening, why it is happening, what are the relationships, and how can I use this information in a new situation or in a new context. But sometimes, you need to explain it. You as a doctoral student has to explain it to the readers of your thesis, especially to the professors, your supervisor, and so on. Me, I have to take the information about, in this case, about critical thinking and work with it in such a way that I can explain it to you. If I have to explain it to high school students, I should have to treat the information in a different way. If I have to explain it to experts, well, I have to change it again to be or to address that audience. It doesn't mean that you manipulate the information. You keep the gist of the information. But what you change is the wording, the way of presenting, because you have to adjust it to the intended audience. And that is explanation. That means that you need to approach the information from different points of view in order to be able to explain it to other people. Then emerges analysis. And analysis implies what I think was Adrian, that talks about patterns and relationships. In order to identify patterns, you need to analyze the information and look for elements and the relationship. And that creates the patterns that you are looking for. So analysis is a skill that lets you go to the information, identify all the elements and connect them in such a way that then you can have a very deep knowledge of that information. And this is another important skill that you need to master, especially when you are doing your dissertations, because it means that you look at explicit information and look for implicit information. What is behind the words? But it's not something that you can do without paying attention to the evidence that will support your inference. Okay? It's not just to say, I think that this person is not telling me this, but is telling me this. It's not, I think. You need evidence, and you need a process of reasoning in order to do that. But the thing is that you can read explicit information and derive implicit one. And evaluation is another very important critical thinking skill, because it's a skill that lets you determine how valid an information is, how credible it could be in relation to the information itself, but also the evidence presented to support it. And this is the skill that will help you decide what articles, what theories, what methodologies you are going to use. Because you have, for instance, a set of theories that may be useful for your study, but you need to evaluate each one of them in terms of a specific criteria. I mean, for instance, methodology. Is this methodology useful for my study? Okay, I have this population. What population is in this study? I have these research questions. What research questions are in this study? How they are related or not? So judgment is a very important skill to master, because that will help you support your decisions and your ideas. Mark says, or explain the methodology to professors that do not have any comprehension. Oh my God. You have problems with your back, but you are still the same idea. Okay. And the last one, Adrian has talked about that, is metacognition. It's self-awareness. It's a skill that lets you evaluate your own thinking process. It's that reflective skill that lets you say, I didn't take this into account, or how great I am, I did this and this was supposed to be this way. So in that metacognition process, or metacognitive process, which is the correct term, you are aware of your strengths and your weaknesses while thinking. And then that lets you introduce changes to improve the quality of your process. Okay, these are the 7 critical thinking skills that I have selected to explain today. And if you have any question about them, please feel free to ask that question. If you cannot do it right now, you can do it at the end. Don't worry. So it seems to be that critical thinking is something important, not only for you as individuals, but also as members of the society. If you check these 2 codes, you will see how these scholars have talked about the importance of critical thinking in education. These codes imply that an education that just lets you or makes you repeat things is not what is good for you as individual and for you as part of the society. It's not good for the society. And also, if you check that, you will see that nowadays, when you are looking for a job, it's not so important how much special knowledge you have, but how much you can apply your skills to find information, evaluate information, monitor your process, and work with other people. So that's why Einstein said in that quote. Yes, of course, it is difficult to judge yourself. That's why you need to practice it with small things, with daily life situations. It's not that you are, in fact, you are not judging yourself. You are judging your thinking process, which is different. Okay? You focus on evaluating how well you perform your thinking process. If you think it in an objective way, if you take into account all the evidence provided, that's the thing that we're talking about. It's not that you are judging you and your values. You know what your values are, and you take them into account, and you establish what's the impact of them on your conclusion. So it's just a matter of practice. And that's, I say this, now you know what critical thinking is, and it's important, and so on. So what's the next step? Is reflect upon what we have discussed today, and is to develop that one of those components that we see in one of the concepts. Develop the aptitude to use it. You need to decide to use those skills. So you need to make them part of your personal life first, and then your professional life. So whenever you are facing a situation, you may reach the most valid conclusion, and that you know why you are doing this. If you are going to you're building one of your building meetings in order to discuss new things for the building, that what is the conclusion that you get there is supported by an analysis of what is happening, an evaluation of the options, and that you are able to explain your point of view to other people. So in such a common situation, you can apply it and develop your critical thinking skills. Okay, Adrian is telling Joy Bell something about metacognition, and Mark says, take critical ignorance and convert it to critical understanding and actualization. Yeah, I'm not quite sure what critical ignorance is. If we think that critical in the environment that we are discussing means intending courses of action. So you have to explain that to me, Mark. So if you go to the discussion space of Doctoral Net, you will find a document, a PDF document, with some exercises that I have developed for you to begin mastering the critical thinking skills. And in this case, all the exercises are with daily life situations. So please download that document, practice with them, and of course you are invited to the next webinar, in which you will have the opportunity to share your experience doing those exercises with the rest of the attendees. And also, we are going to look at these 7 critical thinking skills, but then from the point of view of academic and research situation. So we will see how observation, understanding, explanation, and so on, and metacognition can be done with academic and research situation. I just said, wow, that would take a tremendous amount of effort on your part, Mark. Yeah, but you know, the Mark is a very, very skillful man. Okay, so these are the references that we have used today. And this is what's up at doctoral net right now. So remember that you should feel free to make us suggestions or give us ideas about how to improve our work. And this is the list of the next webinars. In 2 weeks, not next week, but the other one, I'm going to talk about critical thinking part 2. And then I'm going to talk about critical analysis part 1 with exercises. I'm just now preparing the webinars about critical reading and critical writing. So we can go from thinking to analysis to reading to writing. And in the middle, I'm going to prepare a webinar about what editing a thesis really means. Why it is not something that can be used just with a spelling software, okay? And what is the difference between editing a paper and editing a dissertation, okay? So, Mark says, ignoring tested methodology of known processes wanted to make into a cookbook recipe, often with unknown ingredients. Yeah, I mean, that is ignorance, but how much critical that ignorance is, that's the point. I'm going to finish the recording, but we can still talk about things if you want. Wait a minute. Okay. All right.